One of the fears running under the surface is this, am I going to be able to provide for the family? Like, it's just there. And the numbers are huge. I can't remember what they are right now, but it was like 87% or something, like huge numbers, that it's just in the back of a guy's mind, or actually not even in the back of his mind, like in the front of his mind. The only demographic group where that was anywhere close to the same for women was single moms. And so, because they're always having to think about how do you provide,
Absolutely.
It's the day to day. And so as a result, men will do many things to try to get some sort of a sense of security around that fear.
Welcome to the True Wealth Podcast, where happiness is more often found in the soul of someone's wealth rather than the size of it. Money, after all, is a tool. It's not the destination. Money is the fuel to advance your core values and your purpose. Join us as we share some inspiring stories, true wealth life lessons, and practical strategies to help you design a life of intention, generosity, and fulfillment. Welcome back to another episode of the True Wealth Podcast. I am extremely excited for today's episode. Joining me is co-host Ryan Obeden and our special guest, Dr. Shaunti Feldhahn. Glad to have you with us. She's a graduate from Harvard University. She was an analyst on Wall Street and today applies her analytical skills to investigating eye-opening, life-changing truths that help people thrive. She is a phenomenal speaker. Ryan will attest to that, who she researches the little things that make a big difference in life and relationship. Well, podcast time limits me to list all of her books. So today we're just going to focus and build off of a great one, Thriving in Love and Money, 5 game-changing insights about your relationship, your money, and yourself. Ryan, if you would, just give a little background as to how this episode came about.
Yeah, I'll provide some context here. So a while back, I went to a conference called the Kingdom Advisors Conference. And for those of you who don't know, Kingdom Advisors is a gathering of financial professionals who try to integrate their faith into how they practice. And there were a number of amazing speakers at this conference, but your session, Shaunti, was phenomenal to me. And I got home. You did your session on your book that you wrote called Thriving in Love and Money. And I got home and was super excited and told Kevin and Nick, we've got to have her on our podcast. The way you talked about couples and about money, about what's really happening underneath the surface of financial conflict, I mean, it sounded like you've been sitting in meetings that Kevin and Nick and I have been sitting in for years. So
Absolutely.
As an advisor who works with couples every day, we've watched couples struggle to navigate the financial conversation together. And we feel the weight of what goes unspoken in those meetings too. And I thought, you know what? The conversation you had with us at Kingdom Advisors was one that our listeners need to hear and all of the people that we work with need to hear. So I talked to Kevin and Nick, and here we are. Dr. Shaunti Feldhahn, welcome to the True Wealth Podcast.
Oh my gosh, there's no way I can live up to that introduction. Thank you, Ryan.
Set the bar high.
Thank you, Kevin.
Well, you set the bar high down at Kingdom Advisors Conference, so and you caused quite a stir in our office with all the different books you've written. This one that we're going to focus on today is one that I think our listeners are going to be super excited about. But I want to start with the thing that intrigued me most when you spoke at the Kingdom Advisors, because I think it's the idea that our listeners need to hear first. So, as an advisor, I've sat across the table from couples who clearly are not fighting about what they think they're fighting about. The numbers are fine, the plan is solid, the income is there, but something underneath the surface is creating friction that no spreadsheet can touch. And what you said that day gave me some language for something that I've observed for years but couldn't quite name it. So let's start there with this core thesis. When couples argue about money, what is it that they're really arguing about?
Well, I'm glad you guys noticed that, because a lot of people don't, but it is true. And so the way we put it in the book and when speaking, like at the event that you're talking about, we say when you are having tension around money, it's not about the money. It's how money makes you feel. And it's about a host of things that are running under the surface, that are going on inside each of you, that and inside yourself, that you may not even recognize that's
Sure.
going on inside of you. but certainly whatever is going on inside your spouse, for example. And so it's also, as a result of all of that, it's also about this host of often unrecognized sort of assumptions about how money should work. It's just we tend to have two different shoulds. And so you're bumping up against all of that. And it is usually truly not about the numbers.
Well, I know, Shaunti, Ryan's been talking about you nonstop since you came back from that conference. So I kind of feel like I know a little bit, at least about your story, but just so our listeners get a little bit more background, is this research you did by yourself? I think your husband, Jeff, helps with a lot of these things. Tell us a little bit about who you are and how you came up with or the research that went into this project.
Sure thing. Actually, so I'll give you a little bit of background. So Jeff and I, when we met at Harvard, we got our graduate degrees there. And well, I got my master's degree. I got my PhD later. And we ended up working in New York. I was an analyst on Wall Street. He's an attorney, so he's working at one of the big sweatshop law firms. And when we moved to Atlanta, which is where we actually still live today, there was this right-hand turn. And, it's one of those things that I personally think this was God, like, okay, you're going to do something different with all that background, with all that experience. And so that process took us into what we do today, which is a lot of social research with a very, very particular goal of really trying to dig out the little things that matter the most. Like if you're really only going to focus on this thing or this thing, what's going to have the biggest impact? And so this particular project actually came up because of a financial services company called Thrivent. You guys are probably familiar with Thrivent, that basically contacted us. This was a number of years ago, and they said they wanted to do an initiative to help people in their marriages around money. And, they said what we've all seen, and it's accurate, that money is one of the things that is causing a lot of the heartaches in marriages. But the way they put it is, we don't think it has to be. And they basically said, how would you feel about making this your next project and them sponsoring some of the research? And so that's how this whole thing started. We ended up spending 3 years on this and doing, as we do with all of our studies, a big nationally representative research study that was guided, just so everybody knows, this is not, a Facebook poll. These are fairly extensive research studies guided by the former chief of survey design of the U.S. Census Bureau.
Well,
so
I think I read.
We were digging out.
I think I read somewhere. I don't know if it was in your background materials or the book or something that was really intriguing to me, and it was certainly interesting. And you said something like you were first invited to do the research, love, and money, but you weren't sure you wanted to do it because you were pretty sure it would change your lives. That was really an interesting statement because most researchers kind of pursue a topic with a clinical detachment. However, you kind of were afraid what you were going to find. So I'm really curious, what were you afraid of? And then after you began researching, were you right to be afraid of it?
Okay, I'm going to lose all credibility with you two now. I'm just telling you right off the bat that any financial advisor, any financial planner is going to be like, okay, we're done with this conversation as soon as I tell you this. But no, actually, the thing I was afraid of, it came up as soon as we got this invitation from Thrivent, and we had been like, okay, what's our next project? How are we going to afford it? Like, these are expensive projects.
Yeah.
And this one I think cost $120,000. And I know it's a lot of effort. It's a lot of time. And, Thrivent was going to give us more than half of that. And so we should have been like, woohoo, we should have been incredibly excited. And instead, Jeff and I, initially we were like, oh my gosh. And then we were like, my gosh, because
totally
after all these years of doing research on relationships and all these things that had helped us in our marriage, money was the one big area that we were very much not on the same
Sure.
page. And
Well, that's
so
good to
we
hear.
recognized, well, I don't know. Like I said, I might have just lost all credibility with
Well,
you.
just so
But
you know, Shaunti, I think you're not the only one. Advisors, that old saying, the cobbler's kids don't have any shoes.
Yeah.
That can be the same for financial advisors too. So I think we're all on the same page here going,
Perfect.
how badly
Absolutely.
do we really want to have this conversation?
Yep, exactly. Well, the thing that for me is the big, like, wow thing based on all the research is once we actually did it and once we realized again what we were having tension about, it wasn't about the money, it was about all this other stuff, and we started looking at what's all that other stuff. And once we actually started being able to communicate around money well, rather than kind of ignoring it, which is what we had done before,
Sure.
and it was like, oh my goodness, like if we can do this, anybody can do this.
Sure.
Well, so you
Go ahead,
speak to a
Ryan.
lot of rooms, Dr. Shaunti. I keep calling you Dr. Shaunti. I feel like I
Please
need
don't.
to, but
Just call me
I'll call you
Shaunti.
Shaunti. But you
Thank
do
you.
have your doctorate's degree. You speak to full rooms of financial professionals at events like Kingdom Advisors all the time. You've been on the Today Show and Focus on the Family. You've written in the New York Times and then Cosmopolitan. Pretty unique range of audiences. You pretty much touch on every shape or form of audience. So, but what I noticed about your approach and what resonated for me as an advisor is that the message holds depth across all for everyone, no matter their religious background, their faith, their income
Absolutely.
level, their life stage. What do you find that almost every audience has in common when it comes to money in marriage, regardless of those things?
Well, probably the most important thing is true, because there's many things that every audience has in common, because that's actually all the stuff we put in the book. Like if things changed by racial background or religious background or age, then it's like, something else is going on here other than, how you're handling relationships and what you feel on the inside. So what we found almost everybody has in common is no matter what, most people have tension around money in some way. Most couples do. And it's that thing that we were talking about, that it's not about the money. Like, regardless, like, even we did a study group with some of the wealthiest people imaginable. We were speaking at I guess the best way of putting it was a sort of a private event for very, very high net worth individuals to try to help them in their relationships, just in some of the other research that we've done over the years. And so we took the opportunity and asked the organizers, hey, would you be willing if we sat down with some of these couples and did these anonymous interviews as part of this research study, and found that, oh, it didn't matter. Like all the high net worth people had all the same issues. Actually, in some of them put it like, we have more to argue about. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about the book. So, what was the one thing, what would be one thing that you want someone to understand what the book is and what it's not? Because I want to make sure our listeners come into the conversation, with the right frame.
Yes. This is not a book to help you have a great budget. There are plenty of those books out there. And trust me, you don't want my advice on how to have a great budget. Anyway, that's your job, right? Like, you guys are good at financial advice and all that. This truly, what we felt like we should focus on and be very, very laser focused was, how do you have a great relationship around money? And so that's, yes. So if you're hoping for the financial advice, nope, I'm just going to toss it right back to you guys.
Yeah, and unfortunately for the engineering types that like to put everything in an Excel spreadsheet, there's no way to include that or measure that in an Excel spreadsheet. So
yeah, the relationship stuff. Yes.
Right, the relationship.
But one of the things, me being a statistician, I can tell you that one of the things that is accurate for all those engineering types is that we can demonstrate that some of these factors that we're talking about actually are the case for the majority of couples. Now, I should say, not all, right? Like if 82% of couples said, yep, this is us, 18% didn't, right? So just keep that in mind as we go. This is just to get you started with a conversation.
I love that. Okay, so your research found that 77% of couples can't talk about money without awkwardness, conflict, avoidance, something like that. And 92% of couples reported tension around money or avoid talking about it altogether. So, as an advisor, I guess those numbers don't surprise me. We get to deal with that all the time. I'd honestly put them a little higher in rooms that I've been in. But here's the finding I want to unpack because I think it changes everything. So, you discovered that in most cases, conflict doesn't occur because a couple has money problems. Conflict occurs because a couple can't talk about money. So
Correct.
that distinction is a pretty profound one. So what does it mean, and what does it change about how we approach the problem?
So the communication piece of this, everybody knows how important communication is, right? Like, I mean, I think if you just ask people what are the most important things for marriage in general and relationships in general, everybody knows that. We don't necessarily know what does that mean. And so what we're talking about when we're talking about communicating, it's relatively easier. It's not necessarily easy, but it is easier to say, hey, I'm going to need $1,200 for such and such, a thing with the kids playing travel sports. And then, you can say, oh, well, which account are we going to take that from? Like, that's a logistical thing that you can talk about. What makes it difficult to talk about is all the emotional stuff going on under the surface. Like, should our kid even be playing travel sports? Like, I mean, first of all, it's a lot of money and they don't seem all that excited. And one spouse is like, yes, but it's incredibly important for their social development. And they're thinking about all these other things that matter. And so that's the stuff we need to be able to communicate about.
Sure.
And that's also what often gets missed, in part because, as Jeff and I did, we avoid those conversations to begin with because every time we start it, we end up having tension, and it's better to just kind of work around it.
Sure. Well, I think you have a line that kind of stayed with me that since Ryan first mentioned it is money gives us a window into the heart, which really kind of resonates with us because one of our taglines as our group is we want to go above and beyond the numbers and really deal more with the soul of your wealth rather than the size of it. So that kind of really resonated with me very strong. But as you say, that couples learn to peer into each other's thoughts, dreams, and their fears around money. They don't just resolve problems, they kind of grow closer. But that's different. That's a different frame than the way most people approach financial conversations in marriage. So how do you get from this is going to be difficult to this is actually an opportunity for connection? How do you make that switch?
Well, I hate to say it, that's one of the reasons we wrote the book is, I mean, truly, no, but sorry, cough.
You're good.
That's fine.
That is one of the reasons, this is going to sound funny, but that's one of the reasons we wrote the book. The effort that people put in to trying to understand what is going on under the surface is the same effort that is going to actually unlock. It's like a key, unlocking a lock, unlocking a door that opens up this window into what we were talking about, into the heart, into the soul, into the stuff that really matters. And then also all of a sudden, if you will actually go, okay, so maybe this person is different from me. Maybe they think something different about what should be the case here. And maybe that's not illegitimate, as they start doing that and they really, truly just step into it with goodwill, and try to lean in, curiosity, what's happening in you in order to understand, not in order to win an argument. Suddenly that is where you see this actually takes intentionality, but this is way better and this feels better in our marriage. And you stop thinking, oh, this is going to be so difficult, because this is going to be so difficult stuff is the stuff that comes along when you don't understand.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Shaunti, so let's take this in a slightly different direction here. Kevin, in the True Wealth Blueprint, and Kevin, feel free to jump in here. One of the foundational convictions is that a financial plan has to be built on shared values and shared purposes. We talk a lot about purpose. We even help our clients to write a statement of financial purpose, and that helps us to drive conversations and decisions around finance. But here's what I've observed as an advisor. So you can have the most carefully constructed plan, and if the two people it's designed for never talked about what money actually means to them individually, what it represents, what it triggers, what it's for, the plan's built on this fault line that neither of them can even see. So does your research bear that out? And what does it look like in a marriage when that fault line finally gives way?
Well, so let me talk about what's underneath that question, right? Like about the fact that that fault line, as you call it, and that's a great like imagery, right? Because what's often happened, and the way that we put it, one of our main findings, we had 5 findings, and one of the first ones, one of the main ones, is that when you're having friction around money, the day-to-day kind of friction, not necessarily the big stuff, although that happens, but literally like the day-to-day stuff, it's almost like, I like that analogy, I like that word picture, because it's almost like you're standing on 2 different sides of a fault line. And you don't realize it. And so one of the main findings is that you don't realize you are truly not valuing what your spouse is valuing. You wouldn't intend that to be the case, but suddenly when you've got some seismic activity,
right,
the fault line is revealed and you guys are pushed further apart, and there's a lot of damage and there's a lot of hurt feelings. And so what happens in many marriages, including me and Jeff, this was definitely us, is that you learn to stay away from the fault line. Like I'm just not gonna, you do your money over there, I'll do my money over here, because we just can't talk about it. And suddenly, once you actually, even if it's just this one thing of trying to understand what your spouse is valuing and how it's different from you and your assumptions, that alone, honoring that, can really help bring you guys together. I mean, and truly, honestly, heal, using your word picture, heal that fault line to some degree.
Sure. Well, kind of a follow-up on that question a little bit, but on the practical question, it's one that I think our listeners are going to be asking. So how does a person begin showing that genuine respect for the spouse's different values around money, especially when those values genuinely, kind of feel wrong, to you personally or to you. So I would think there's probably a gap between mentally accepting what your spouse values that is different when compared to accepting, you're going to accept them, but then I may think that's logical, but am I ready to just put it in the plan? I mean, it's one thing to say intellectually that makes sense, but it's another to say, okay, so how do you do that? How do you close that gap?
I'm going to lose all credibility with you, Kevin, right now. So
not at all.
One example is that you are assuming, as is understandable, you're a financial planner, you're a financial advisor, okay? You are assuming something that is very common to people who are planner types, which is there needs to be a plan and everything has to go into it.
Sure.
As opposed to a different type of value that somebody could be married to a planner, and that person is like, I really value some flexibility. Like, I really value the ability to say not everything has to go into the plan. And even the planner is going to say, okay, even that has to go into a plan. So the flexibility goes into the plan. And listen, it is not that that's wrong, right? Like we can all come up with absolutely, we can say 100 reasons. You guys could say more than that, why having a good financial plan is important. And that's what you do, which is awesome. But it's an example of someone who is more planning minded, which I would imagine is going to be 90% of your listeners, right? I would think so. You may not realize, Mr. or Ms. Planner, that every day, without ever intending to, you are shutting down your spouse and how they value using money. And so you're saying this is the right way to do it. And so this is the way Jeff used to say with me once we actually realized what was going on under the surface. He was like, I just thought you had a character flaw.
Yeah.
Like, because I'm definitely the one that values more flexibility. And he's like, I just thought that was a character flaw.
Well, that helps, because I've had some where, the husband thinks that gas is a necessity in the boat, but he thinks facial creams are a necessity. And it's like, okay, you guys are way off page. And certainly a budget has never saved a marriage, but it does uncover at least some good conversations.
Absolutely, it does. Well, that's actually one of the most important tools that a budget does, is it actually, if you use it correctly, it actually forces you to surface these different values that we have. But again, I'm just going to push in on this, because my guess is that 90% of your people think one way. And my guess is that based on our statistics, at least half of them are married to someone who does not necessarily think that way. Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
And so, yeah. And so the thing that you don't realize is how easy it is for you to shut down what your spouse values and shut down their feeling of being included in the financial planning and the financial conversations in the marriage. And so the real thing that you asked a minute ago, and that I think you're asking now, is how do you honor that during a budgeting process, for example, during those conversations? And so do you mind if I give you an example?
Please.
Yes, please.
Okay. And I think, Ryan, you're going to have to remind me. I can't remember if I told this story.
Is it Diet Coke?
No, it wasn't the Diet Coke example, although
that was one of my favorites. But if you have a better example,
I can describe that one in a minute. But this is more of that planning, saving versus flexibility spending kind of dichotomy, which is the most common of the different value systems, and how easy it is to not value what your spouse is valuing. So this example, this happened while we were just on the far side of having gone through this research study and trying to practice what we were learning and what we had put in the book. It wasn't always easy, but we were trying to practice it, right? So one thing that I will tell everybody, this is just a little free consulting. Don't ever spend 3 years on a research project and a book and then put the book out 10 days before a national emergency is declared. Just a little free consulting about It's like a really bad business model, right? Like you spend all this time and money and then nobody buys the book. And all the speaking engagements are canceled and, whatever. So when the pandemic hit and when the shutdown hit, suddenly we lost 86% of our income. Okay. And because we are like a lot of other people who are in the public event space, where a ton of our revenue for us to pay our staff, etc., it comes from speaking engagements, public events, and then book sales that come from that. And so suddenly 86% of our income went away. And, of course, it's like, oh my goodness, what do we do? And Jeff, practicing, which was good, practicing what we had been learning about communicating, he came to me and he said, I have to tell you, I am wrestling with trying not to have resentment right now. Because, he's more the saver, I'm more the spender. And by the way, one of the things we found in all of the research is even in a marriage where you have two savers, somebody is going to be more comfortable with spending than the other. Like it's just a very common thing. And so even though I wasn't crazy about spending, like I knew what we had to live in and the budget and all the things, I'm just more comfortable with that. And so he said, I'm struggling with resentment because if we had not spent certain money in the last few years, like if we had not gone with the kids to Disney World and had that graduation trip, if we had not gone out to dinner those times, if we had not gone bowling as a family, we would have thousands more dollars in our bank account that we could use to get through this system, this period of time that we're in. And then he goes, and this is to his credit, again, he was trying to practice the value noticing and honoring. And he said, but I also realize that's not 100% fair because you were making an investment in our family. And by being willing to book a Disney World trip, for example, by being willing to take the kids bowling, you were building relationship and you were building memories and you were building closeness in the family. And now we're stuck in quarantine on top of each other and we like each other.
Well, that just nails the true wealth, because we always say true wealth is everything you have that money can't buy and death can't take away. And that's just what you're talking about. It's the experiences, it's the relationships, and incredibly valuable.
Well, let me just tell you, when you will honor those things, because somebody is probably valuing those things that you're talked about, and both people probably are, just in different ways. But when you actually do, like what Jeff did, and say, look, I will tell you, this is what I'm wrestling with, but I also want to I want to point out that I see what you are valuing. And what that did, as he said, look, you were making an investment in our family and we like each other now, in quarantine. And what that allowed me to do, all the defensiveness that normally comes up in those money conversations never came up. It just dropped away. And it was a lot easier for him to say, and can we have a conversation about an austerity budget right now?
Sure.
And for me to be able to have that conversation, because I knew that what had mattered to me had been heard. And even though he was like, look, I might still have disagreed. Like maybe we could have done a free picnic in the park rather than going bowling, but having been seen and having what mattered valued made me a lot more able to talk about it. And that is our encouragement for anybody listening to this.
Absolutely.
Is that you can go a long way if you will say, look, I don't understand why hair care costs so much every month. Like, if you're a dude and you get a great clips cut and it's like, why does this cost $250? I don't understand, but I can see that it makes you feel beautiful. And I can see that it makes you approach the world with confidence. And even though I don't understand it, I want to honor that. That goes so long.
Certainly.
Towards that conversation.
Well, let's get to insight number 2. So, and I was really glad to see insight 2. It's probably most directly connected to what we try to do on the True Wealth Framework. And I wasn't excited to see it, but I was glad to see it because it confirmed that that I wasn't missing something or that I hadn't lost my mind. Because I hope I say this right. In insight 2, you found that we use money to try to relieve our own fears, but in doing so, we often make our partner's fears worse. And I get that, and I have to admit humbly that has happened in my own marriage. For often, and I'm supposed to know better. But here are two people who genuinely love each other. They're trying to protect themselves and their family, and accidentally making each other's fears worse with every financial decision. So. Again, how does that align with your research and discover that origin of those fears, and how do they play out in the marriage? Should I be changing or adjusting how I ask it? Like you kind of gave a great example there, but what do I,
help?
How does this work?
Help.
Yeah. So here's what we don't necessarily realize is going on kind of under the surface, and this. It's too long to get into the details, but it harkens back to some of the other data from some of our other projects, including For Women Only and For Men Only, which are about kind of what is commonly going on under the surface in a man's heart and a woman's heart, and how are those things different in some cases. And so one of the things that we found is that men and women tend, now this is not 100%, this is usually somewhere in the 75 to 85% range, right?
Yep.
But they tend to have two different sets of kind of primary insecurities running under the surface and primary fears. And so as a result, they're kind of looking for and longing for and needing to be built up in those areas to like fight those fears.
Certainly.
And so the issue, what often tends to happen, and by the way, because so you don't get angry emails, let me just say out loud that, like, of course, to some degree, we are all fearful about everything and we all need everything, right? Like, but I'm talking about the stuff that really does tend to cause these issues we're talking about in marriage. So what we found is that in general, most men, the one of the fears running under the surface is this, am I going to be able to provide for the family? Like, it's just there. And the numbers are huge. I can't remember what they are right now, but it was like 87% or something, like huge numbers, that it's just in the back of a guy's mind, or actually not even in the back of his mind, like in the front of his mind. The only demographic group where that was anywhere close to the same for women was single moms. And so, because they're always having to think about how do you provide,
Absolutely.
You know, it's the day to day. And so as a result, men will do many things to try to get some sort of a sense of security around that fear. And that will be, for example, working a lot of hours or taking a lot of overtime. Like if you're an overtime worker, you know, or trying to avoid spending, you know, because the money going down in the bank account really feels nervous, even if you've got plenty in the bank account, right? Like it feels, ooh, and that's what's being triggered, is often that fear. Okay. So for women, again, this is not 100%. This was the 75 to 85, depending on which survey we're talking about. But for most women, yeah, of course, like that's a thing, like needing to think about that, but it's more just logical. Of course you have to think about money. You got to
Sure.
pay the bills, right?
Yep.
It's not this big emotional thing for most women, not all. Some women, they do very much understand that. But for most women, the thing that's the worry, the thing that's the subconscious, that's in the back of the mind fear is, are we okay? As a family, like, are we close? Like, is our relationship doing okay? Like, and are the kids happy? Like, is everybody healthy? Like all of that is kind of running under the surface. And so again, you're looking for ways to build up in those areas that you're worried about. So you book a trip to Disney World.
Sure. Sure.
Hey, you know, the kids have been working their little tails off in school. We've got one graduating from high school. Let's go to Disney World as a family and like renew. We haven't spent a lot of time together. This will give us a few days where we get a chance to rebuild our closeness. Let's go bowling. Let's go out to eat. Let's do something. Here's the problem, is that as someone is doing those things to address that fear, guess what? It's making the other person's fear worse on both sides. And so that's the reason we have to sort of understand that.
Well, the best examples out there are the author telling you, this is what we have. So that's as good as it gets. So let's look at Insight 3. And that one was really interesting to me because I've never really thought of it that way. I mean, Insight 3, if I understand it right, is we resist truly becoming a team in our finances. Because you think that would be kind of underwritten, or that's, you know, just a staple. But the path forward that you offered is finding the courage to be vulnerable, and I'll come back to that word, to trust each other, and then to create a genuine joint ownership. So courage, expound on that for me. I'm maybe I don't have any, and that's why I'm asking, but that was an interesting word to me, that you got to have the courage to do that. So
because here's the reality. And like, honestly, like if we only got to these 3 out of the 5, like these would be the ones I would want everybody to remember. And this one that we are talking about right now is, for most marriages, ultimately under the surface, the most foundational one.
Sure. Okay.
Because basically what we found is that we resist being one in marriage, right? Like, you know, I come at this as a person of faith, and I look at, there's a passage in the Bible, many passages in the Bible that talk about that the husband and wife are supposed to be one. And it's like this kind of supernatural thing as it's referenced there. But even people who don't have that necessarily that sort of faith overview, they understand that marriage is about these two people no longer being you and me, but being we, right? Like the two people being one. So here's the thing, our natural human tendency, there's something in us that just resists that wants to I kind of want to do what I want to do, right? Like it's just in there. We have to just acknowledge it. And it's coming out in all sorts of ways, including how we handle money. Like I kind of want to handle money the way I want to handle money. And I don't want to be answerable to you. And it's impossible. If you and me are going to be we have to be answerable to each other. And we have to, for example, care about what we were talking about earlier, like caring about the fact that, okay, you value more flexibility than I do. I think that's wrong, but we're one, we're we. It can't just be me.
Right.
Or, you know, I value flexibility, but it hurts your heart to not have like this buttoned up financial plan.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to be I have to be willing to go your direction too. And so that process is one of the most foundational things. And we don't realize that it is there, but we avoid the conflict by separating ourselves so often. And again, don't realize it. So I'll give you, do you mind another quick example?
Go for it, please.
So one of the things when Jeff and I were doing the interviews that was extraordinarily common, and especially among younger couples, but it certainly wasn't just younger couples, where literally they would have an agreement in their marriage. Like you have your bank account over here. I have my bank account over here. Your paycheck goes in yours. My paycheck goes in mine. You know, we figure out who pays what bills. And we'll split it 50-50. I mean, literally in the middle of one of our interviews, the wife turned to the husband and said, "Oh, by the way, you forgot to Venmo me $58 for the gas bill." And so, you know, and it's like, okay, so that was their workaround. They avoided the tension around money by kind of each doing their own thing and saying, okay, you get yours to spend, I get mine to spend. And, you know, we're going to each, you know, allocate 50% of whatever to the joint bills. And listen, there's nothing wrong technically with saying, okay, we're going to have different bank accounts to handle different things. I mean, Jeff and I do that, but we have total access to each other's accounts. And we don't say, your money is your money, my money is my money, because that's where you stop being one. And one of the things that I often hear from people who've been maybe married longer, they don't have that issue. They go, well, look, I'm not trying to avoid being one. Like we have the same bank account. We're not hiding anything. And I always say, well, okay, maybe you're not. Like maybe that's accurate. But like ask yourself a couple questions. Like, for example, do you ever pull the Amazon package off the front step before your spouse sees it?
Yeah.
That's the same thing, right? It's just in a different package.
Have it delivered to work. Yeah.
Or have it delivered to work.
Like my wife and I had an agreement that I couldn't go into Best Buy alone because dangerous.
That's awesome. I know my husband is like, you know what? I think I will take over the Costco run from now on. Because I'm like, oh, but did you see that thing? So, but that's an example of we're both okay with that. We both agreed. But you have to be willing to acknowledge this to yourself.
I'm sure there's a listener somewhere going, oh, shoot, I thought this was just going to be, I got to find the right budgeting app or the right investment strategy. So now we're going to talk about feelings. And, you know, right away it's like, oh, no. But you kind of give an example about that. But how do I see that when they actually get it right? I mean, other than just saying this conceptually, but is there one that stands out to you?
Oh, yes. I mean, we had tons of couples who talked about going from here to there, right? Like talking about how do they turn money from an opportunity for conflict into an opportunity for connection, right? Like, because that happens. And so this oneness example is a perfect example of where you're like, and when you talk about courage, it takes courage, like actively having the ability to say, I do not want to have this conversation. I do not want to open up myself. I would much rather keep the shopping bags in the car and, or sneak them into the house before Jeff sees them, right? That is something I have to actively still fight today, even a few years later after doing this project and releasing the book. But when I actually go, no, I'm going to bring it in, and he's going to say, I'm going to say, let's talk about this. And say, like, for example, we've been talking about this. I found it on sale. I'm sorry you were, with a client. There was no way for me to, call you ahead of time. I will return it if you want me to. Right? To have the courage to say that, what it does is suddenly it builds trust. And so that is one thing you don't realize you're destroying when you don't do that, even in the little kind of what you think are minor ways. And so we saw so many examples. We even saw a couple of examples of where a spouse, the two spouses owned like a family business together, which I know you probably have those kinds of clients.
Yeah.
And we actually saw multiple examples of, including like at that high net worth private event I was talking about, where they said that the thing that changed their business was suddenly being able to have the courage to talk about and truly try to become one around money in their marriage. And it was like, it had all these follow-on effects of including, I know we've been like at odds about this business line and adding this business line to the business. Can we talk about that? And now you're able to, because you did it in your marriage.
Hey, Shaunti, so you talked about the listener who's probably listening. So we have couple clients, and probably one of them is the financial person and one of them is not.
Okay.
I'm guessing it's the financial person who's listening to this podcast. And
right.
Then you're asking, okay, well, what advice would you give me when my spouse just doesn't want to engage in this conversation about finances? Where do you start?
Again, I'm a little worried about answering that question because it's going to make a few people uncomfortable, but I'm just going to answer it. I'll tell you what we found in the research is that if somebody doesn't want to engage in the financial conversation, usually at least one of the reasons, it may not be, there may be other reasons as well, but usually one of the reasons is that you are shutting them down without intending to.
Okay.
So it sounds like, from what you've described of Jeff, who, by the way, sounds like he's already a guy I want to be like when I grow up, just in how he's handled himself. And I'm taking notes mentally as we're talking here, going, I need to be more like Jeff. Note to self, get more of Jeff's books. But it sounds like a posture of humility is so important in having these conversations, and truly loving your spouse is putting their needs first and understanding why they feel the way they feel. And too often, for those of us who are Excel spreadsheet people who want to make these decisions based on what do the numbers say, we do bulldoze our spouse into these decisions, and they feel like they've lost their voice. So, I
can give you an example of that.
Yeah, please do. For a guy that I know, of course.
For somebody else.
Yeah.
I actually, one of the churches, Jeff and I do marriage events, marriage conferences, that kind of thing pretty frequently. And one of the churches that we had been at, one of the pastors used to be a financial advisor. That was his career, his whole career for like, I want to say 25 years or 30 years. And then he really felt like this right-hand turn and ended up becoming a pastor at this church. And absolutely great guy. And one of the things he told us a story about this exact example, that even years later, as a pastor, no longer a financial advisor, he's still the planner guy, he's still the saver guy. He has the spreadsheet and whatever, and his wife was, she valued a little more flexibility, but, she was like, okay, like, this is our marriage. I'll do this for you. And he noticed she was getting, over the course of a pretty stressful season, she was seeming to get more and more like sad, like a little depressed, not her normal like spark plug happy self. And finally, she started crying one day and just said, "It's just so sad that I have to miss all of the lunches with my female friends. They all get to, get together every, month or every 2 weeks. And, we talk and share. And it's just, I really need it. And I haven't had it for, the last, year or 6 months." And he's like, "Well, why not?" And she said, "Well, you said that we couldn't spend anything right now, that we were in a difficult spot." And he was like, "Oh my gosh." Like, he said, "I made a comment about the fact that, we've probably been overspending on whatever.
Oh.
He was thinking overspending on like a Costco run, right? Like in his head, it was like, "Oh, we went over on that budget category." And she heard, "We can't afford you to go to these lunches anymore."
Wow. Yeah.
With your girlfriends. And he was like, "I felt terrible because we have plenty of money.
Sure.
We've got tons of money set aside. Of course we can do that." And so that's just an example of, without realizing it, he said, I had built up a lifetime of giving her, "This is what we will do." So she didn't even feel like she could ask me.
Wow. Yeah.
Right. And so and he's this awesome guy. And so would never have wanted that. So that's just an example.
Well,
I'm going to go back to Jeff, because
it is to be careful about what we say in front of our kids too, to our spouse, and how that's probably a totally different episode. But that can make kids feel concerned and nervous when they hear dad saying, something that along the lines of, "We can't afford that." Well, are we okay? And I grew up that way, kind of going, okay, mom and dad see money differently. And I grew up being the oldest son who's telling my brothers, "Knock it off. Don't spend money on that. Say no when mom says, 'Do you want this?'" Because I'm worried. Like, are we okay? So anyway, back to it though. Kevin, you have another question.
Well, we're kind of, time's getting a little, we could talk to you for hours.
Yes, we could.
I don't want it to get away from us either there. But in the True Wealth framework, when we work with couples that are at different life stages, so from young couples, we call them the launchers, jugglers. We got all these names for the different stages of life. But I'm curious, from your perspective, does money conflict in marriage look different at different stages, or is it still an underlying problem? And are there particular stages where the 5 insights that you named are most dangerous if they go unnamed? Stages where the stakes are especially high and the patterns get really costly if unaddressed? Is that?
Yes, it is. So the short version of that is, yes, it does change by stage. And the most dangerous stage is the young married. Because this is when you're building up all of your understanding of each other and all of your patterns. And it is a lot easier to try, when you're in that young married stage, to try to work to understand each other and establish the right patterns from the beginning. And one of those patterns being, okay, I'm going to work to understand you. Because after it, think about it. Let's just say, for example, that you've established a pattern of you have your account, I have my account, you do your thing with your money, you do your thing, I do mine with my money. And that's kind of, even though maybe that's like a cop out and you probably shouldn't do it that way, it's just in practice, that's the way it works. Well, now you're young married. Now what happens when you have kids and one of you stays home for a few years and you don't have your own money? And suddenly you feel like there's this weird power dynamic, and like they have all the money power because they're the ones that's earning it. And it's like, whoa, like this is so important for you to talk about from the earliest days so that you build that, all the stuff we've been talking about of trying to understand one another and being one.
I know, again, we're kind of getting wrapped up on time. Well, hopefully we can have you back in the future as a
Absolutely.
guest. But one of the things that we'll do a rapid fire here before we close down. But one of the things I always, kind of our signature close is, what does true wealth mean to you?
I think your definition of it earlier, it's the stuff that matters the most for your soul. I mean, truly, like one of the things that Jeff and I, we're in ministry. Like we don't always have a ton of money in the bank. Like it's like, okay, God, how are we going to pay the staff on Friday? Right. Yes. How are we going to pay for the next research project? Like that kind of stuff happens. And one of the things that we have, seen, there's this great verse in the Bible, again, that talks about trusting God and seeing if he will not open the storehouses of heaven, pressed down, shaken together, and running over.
I think it's in Malachi, isn't it? He says, trust me in this.
Yeah, trust me in this, and trust me in giving, and, and giving me back the money that I've given you. And one of the things that we realized is that pressed down, shaken together, running over, it's not just about money. It's not just him pouring out money on you. I mean, Jeff and I are like, thank you, God. We have an amazing marriage.
Awesome.
That is pressed down, shaken together, running over, something we are unbelievably grateful for.
Well, money can be your conflict, but it can also be your unifier. And that's what I really valued about your book. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to go through these.
We use the term money as a tool, not a destination, right? I mean, and it sounds to me like relationships are the most important thing, right, Dr. Feldhahn?
Yeah, it is, obviously, yes.
Yeah.
Well, some of these rapid fires is kind of one of my favorite parts because some of these you may have asked already, but just for the listeners, we'll go through them. So, well, just one-offs and then we'll kind of wrap it up.
All right. So saver or spender, you or Jeff, and be completely honest.
Yes, I already said I'm much more the saver. I'm much more the spender. He's much more the saver.
Perfect. The single most surprising finding in the 3 years of love and money research. One sentence.
That Jeff and I could actually learn to talk about money well.
Okay, so finish this sentence. The biggest lie couples tell themselves about money is
that it's about the money.
Oh, okay. What's the one thing that most financial advisors say about couples and money that makes you want to gently or not so gently correct them?
Dear. So I will be honest. And it is, it's okay if only one of you comes to the meeting.
Oh, nice.
That is.
Everybody needs to hear that. Amen. I'm with you.
Advice.
And yet I think we've said that. But you're right. So Jeff says you still think of each, I was going to bring this come up earlier, but I didn't, so the listeners won't get this. But Jeff says you still think of each other as nuts sometimes about money, because I think he said you learn to appreciate him even though you think they may be nuts. What's the specific thing that he does that still makes you a little nuts?
Oh no, I have to say this out loud. Actually, it's fine. He knows he's given me permission to say this, talk about it. He has the joke in our marriage is that he has some like obsessive tendencies in somewhere. And there have been times in the past where he will come home from Costco. He'll be like, okay, I added it up. If we only eat Franks and beans for the next 6 months, we'll be able to save $13,500. Let's do it.
Whoa.
I'm like, please no.
No, you're nuts.
There goes lunch with the girls, right?
It's
awesome.
Like I get it. Like that, he loves that kind of stuff. So
right.
Yes.
Okay, so finish this one. The couples who truly thrive in love and money all seem to understand that
their spouse is different, and they honor that.
All right. Well, every listener should carry this out the door and remember it. Conflict doesn't occur because you have money problems. Conflict occurs because you cannot talk about money. Start the conversations, and the money problems become a doorway into your marriage rather than a wall between you. Well, thank you for joining us on another episode of the True Wealth Podcast. A special thank you to our guest today, Dr. Shaunti Feldhahn. Thank you so much. So many great insights. I hope you will come back again in the future and share more of those insights. I love the title of this episode, Thriving in Love and Money, when your marriage and your money finally get on the same page. I would encourage all listeners to get a copy of any of Dr. Shaunti's books. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, please like, follow, or share it with a family member, friend, coworker. If you have specific questions regarding today's episodes, just send an email to info@pinnaclewealth.com, and we'll make sure to get your questions answered. And for the first 10 listeners who will email us their name, email, and their mailing address to info@pinnaclewealth, we will send you a complimentary copy of Dr. Feldhahn's book, Thriving in Love and Money, 5 game-changing insights about your relationship, your money, and yourself. Thank you for joining us. Why Pinnacle Wealth? Because the pinnacle of wealth is true wealth. Thank you, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Guests on the True Wealth podcast are not affiliated with CWM LLC. Investment advisory services are offered through CWM LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor.